This video is sponsored by Shortform, but more on that later. So you guys might have heard of the term 30 is the new 20. It's based on this idea that because we aren't having families at the age of 20 anymore and postponing marriage and commitment and all that kind of stuff until the age of 30, people are using their 20s to explore themselves a little more, have a little fun, and just use their 20s as sort of like a second adolescence. Now initially this did make sense to me because I'm in my 20s right now, but the main issue about being a 20-something is that you don't have that much of a disposable income. None of us are living in very fancy houses or lofts as the media suggests through Friends or New Girl. And as a recent grad or even in your mid-20-somethings, you're typically in an entry-level role, which isn't exactly glamorous yet. Now, I would agree that even though we don't have marriage or mortgages or kids kind of tying us down, to think that the decisions that you make in your 20s won't affect your 30s and 40s kind of feels wrong to say, especially in the context of money. Even last week I made a video about compound interest and I showed that waiting 10 years to invest makes a huge difference on the value of your portfolio. So naturally I feel like in other facets of life this has to apply in some way too. And according to therapist Dr. Meg Jay, apparently it does. So for those of you who don't know who Dr. Jay is a therapist who wrote the book, The Defining Decade, and she talks about why our 30s aren't exactly the new 20s and that the things that we do in our 20s have consequences for decades later. Naturally, as a 20-something who's looking for more guidance in life, I decided to read her book, The Defining Decade, and I thought that it would be interesting to share some of the learnings that I gained from that book with you guys. Now, if there's a book like The Defining Decade that you've been wanting to read but haven't yet because you're either short on time or you just don't know if it's worth the investment on reading, allow me to introduce the sponsor of today's video, Shortform. Shortform is a platform that provides uber high quality book summaries that cover different nonfiction topics. So if you're interested in genres related to personal finance, money, career, business, entrepreneurship, as well as self-improvement, Shortform is a great way to access the world's best ideas easier. Not only does Shortform provide high quality summaries, they also provide exercises that you can use to apply the learnings that you gain from that book into your own life. So it's not just about gaining knowledge, it's also about applying that knowledge. Now, whether I'm at home alone or on the subway with nothing to do, I like to pull out Shortform on my phone to just start reading about a book that I've always been interested in. I've been reading The Defining Decade on Shortform because I finished the book a few weeks ago, and Shortform provides a quick summary to recap all of the main points that were given in the book. Reading Shortform's book guide of The Defining Decade has definitely helped me solidify my understanding of the book in general and what Dr. J's message is. Now, because Shortform is the sponsor of today's video, I am going to hook you guys up. And if you guys want to get a 5-day free trial, use my link, shortform.com/SamLouie, or click on the link in my description below. Once again, thank you so much to Shortform for sponsoring today's video. And now back to The Defining Decade. The Defining Decade splits mainly into two sections. It's work and love. And the overarching theme of these two topics, to me, is intention. Thinking that your actions don't have consequences in the future is kind of silly, so make sure that the things that you do related to work, related to love and relationships, have intention behind them. Dr. J also shares that our 20s are a very special time in our life because, physically we still are in our primes. Our brains during our 20s actually go through a second growth spurt. The first growth spurt happens to us as toddlers when we're learning as much as we can so we can prepare ourselves for childhood. During these growth spurts, our brains are going through a massive production of neurons which affect our abilities to learn and develop new skills. So as a 20-something, when we're literally primed to learn as much as we can and absorb as much information so that we can actually have skills that'll prepare us for the years ahead, we have to take advantage of this time. There's a reason why as a 50-year-old or as a 60-year-old, it's harder to learn new things than as if you were 20. It's like, as they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. For the older folks out there, I'm not trying to discourage you from learning new things. I'm just saying that it is easier when you're younger, and I hope you can agree with that at least. So for our work phase, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this a lot. It's about finding your passion, having this identity crisis. You're probably a recent grad, or you dropped out of school, or you never went to college, and you're just confused on what direction you should take with your life. Now, there are typically two ways to handle this kind of identity crisis. One is actually finding internships or trying to gain some sort of work experience that's related to what you want to pursue. And that's what Dr. Jay would call building identity capital. Identity capital is basically like your personal stock of experiences and assets, personalities of who you are and what make up your identity. So this could relate to things like stuff on your resume, your experiences, your hobbies, your interests, as well as more intangible assets like your personality, your outlook on life, etc. The second way to handle an identity crisis, according to Dr. Jay, is something she would call the Starbucks phase, where you don't really do anything about what you want to do and instead take on jobs like working as a Starbucks barista, or really any job that isn't necessarily meaningful to the type of work that you're actually pursuing. So if you want a career in retail or hospitality, then yes, being a Starbucks barista will help you. But if you want to be more involved in advertising or marketing, being a barista may not be the most helpful in that way. So if you want to have an identity crisis, you want it to be at least somewhat productive, so you're building skills that'll be transferable to any other career or role that you really decide to take. Now, building identity capital can be difficult because you are considering like who you are first, and sometimes we don't even know who we are, and that's why we need to build more capital. So if we don't really have a sense of identity or who we are, it'd be a good idea to start gaining new meaningful experiences, whether it is going out and meeting more people, trying out a new activity, or just learning more about something that you might be interested in. Identity capital is going to help you become a more interesting person, and it'll help you relate to others who may go through similar experiences as you. That leads me to another important part of Dr. J's view on work, which is don't underestimate the power of weak ties. So we all have our friend groups, our best friends, our day ones, ride or dies, you know, it comes in many names. These are the people that you would FaceTime when you're feeling down, or maybe you just want someone to talk to. These people are great and all, and after a period of time, you start to become a bit more complacent and comfortable in your friendships. You and your close friends will probably gain very similar life experiences, and eventually you might have the same viewpoints. While it's nice to have someone who has similar viewpoints to you, it can also create some sort of echo chamber and maybe even distance you from the rest of society. So Dr. Jay cautions us against that and actually believes in the power of weak ties, which are people that we may not necessarily be close with, but are, I guess, aware of. They're like the mutual friends, they're friends of friends of friends, they might be family friends, they might be a professor, something like that. It's usually those in your distant network that will be able to help you in whatever career that you might be interested in. Like just the other day, I was at an alum event for Northeastern, and I actually ran into people that I stopped talking to a while ago. Not because we fell apart or anything, but just life got in the way. And it was really nice just reconnecting with these old friends, as well as meeting new people at the school that we just were affiliated with, but otherwise wouldn't have met. One of these people that I met is in product management, which is a field that I might be interested in the future. So if I were to pursue a career in product management, for example, I might reach out to him and be like, hey, you know, I'm really interested in learning more about product management. Can you help me? Usually people are pretty nice and they will want to help you, but if they don't by any chance, then, you know, no hard feelings. People aren't obligated to help you, but it would be nice of them to. When it comes to figuring out a career for yourself, being realistic is also a very important point in Dr. J's book. If you're 5'5" and have never ran a mile in your life, you know, you're probably not going to be an NBA basketball player. Or if you've just been always shy your whole life, you know, maybe being a public speaker isn't for you. Not to say that you can never become a public speaker if you're shy, But, just try to be realistic about your capabilities and just see where things can go. So yes, your options may be limited from that point on, but that's not actually a bad thing because people usually tend to choose better when they have limited choices because of the paradox of choice. So if you want to be an actor but you've never had any acting experience, getting a star role in like a Marvel movie probably isn't realistic. But what is realistic is maybe signing up for a gig, trying to get a new role at a small production. I'm not saying that if you don't have experience in something that it's impossible for you because you're 20 something, like what do you know? But rather just trying to see a more realistic approach as to how you can get from point A to point B. Now deciding what your point B is or what your goals are, you want to make sure that your goals are actually something that you want to pursue and not just something you feel like you should pursue because of external pressure from family, friends, or other peers. So this could look like being a management consultant at a Big Four firm. Like, yes, there's a lot of prestige, but the hours are pretty tough and generally you're not respected because you were in an entry-level role. But you feel like you shouldn't quit because you feel like your family would be disappointed in you and people would make fun of you. And, eventually you succumb to the pressure. This is something that you want to try to avoid as much as you can. So this is obviously way easier said than done, trying to determine a path that's something that you actually want to do versus what you feel like you should do. And you might lose some friendships along the way, but hey, I think it's way better to lose a friendship than the rest of your life to something that you hate. So if you want to quit that job, maybe start interviewing at other places. Or if your friends are all going to this big city and trying to live up their lives and go on that search for glory, but you want to stay home in your small town, there's really nothing wrong with that. Now, love is kind of interesting because it's pretty inexplicable in some ways, yet we always try to do our best to talk about it. In traditional settings like school, you might learn how to write a resume, but you won't necessarily learn how to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You won't learn social skills or how to build your confidence or, get women or get girls or get men. Like, that's all just very foreign when it comes to school, and usually you'll have to go through like the internet to find answers to your questions. Now with love, there's a pretty unique opportunity to change your life because I think I've heard a really successful person say that the biggest decision that you make in your life is actually who you marry, because you will be spending a lot of time with this person for the rest of your life. Now when it comes to dating and marriage, if you want to be married, it's not really about just one person anymore. It's really about building a family. Like, you can't choose which family you're born into, but you can always pick the family that you will have by starting with a spouse or a partner. A big talking point of Dr. Jay's when she talks about dating is about the concept of dating down. Now, when I say dating down, I'm not talking about dating down someone in terms of income level or their height. I'm talking more about emotional maturity and outlook on life. So if you feel like someone is just more emotionally immature than you are, then they are probably not a good fit for you. Or if they treat you like crap, but you still stay with them for some reason, it probably has something to do with you and how you view yourself. So your narrative when it comes to dating and your perceived sexual value, that comes from your experiences or lack of experiences in middle school, high school, and college. So if you're 25 and you've never had a boyfriend, girlfriend, which is actually pretty common nowadays, you might think because you went on those 25 years without a significant other that you are undesirable because that's the only truth that you know, when usually that isn't probably the case. Throughout your life, you don't ask someone out or you don't get asked out, and that kind of shapes your story a bit. You might begin to tell yourself like, hey, I'm not a very lovable person. I don't deserve to have a relationship. And after a while, you'll learn that you have to love yourself before someone else will love you. Because if you don't value yourself, if you don't respect yourself, why would you expect others to do the same? So don't get into a relationship or don't sleep with someone because you don't want to be lonely. because there will be consequences, physical consequences even, if you were to just fall down that rabbit hole. Instead, when looking for a suitable partner, Dr. Jay suggests looking for someone who has a similar personality to you. That means a similar outlook on life. What are their big 5 personality traits? So how open are they to new experiences? Are they conscientious? Are they more introverted or extroverted? Are they agreeable people, or do they like to pick fights? These are all things to consider when looking for a partner. And if you're thinking, yeah, well, that's kind of a lot of criteria, it's because it kind of is, and you're not meant to fit with the other 3.5 billion people on this earth. Another really cool learning that I got from this book is how people tend to move in together as a means of testing the waters and trying out marriage before they actually do get married. But she shared a statistic that shows that people that actually move in together are more likely to get divorced than those who do not. Now, Dr. Jay says that the main reason behind this is because of their intention. There's a difference between a couple that chooses to become engaged and then move in together because they've already made a commitment to the rest of their lives to each other, versus a couple that chooses to move in together because it's more practical, rent is cheaper, they can share furniture, and then eventually they kind of just slip into marriage because they've been together for such a long time, and the costs of leaving that said relationship would be more difficult than actually just getting married or being divorced even. And if it sounds like the second couple is marrying each other more for the sake of convenience than actual commitment and love, you're right. And that's exactly what Dr. Jay wants to warn you against. So when it comes to moving in with someone, you really have to be intentional about what that move means. Are you guys planning on getting married or planning to stay committed to each other for the rest of your lives? Or is it more out of convenience and because you don't want to disappoint anyone? So there's never really a right way to live your life or to live your 20s. But when you're establishing a foundation, there is some sort of guardrail that you have to follow. So yeah, guys, it's really all about the intention. When you approach work, when you approach relationships, when you're approaching your life, the person that you want to be, you know, make sure that there's a reason behind it, even if the reason is something like, you know, just because I want to, because you don't want to look back in your 50s and 60s and just wish that you'd done something different. So that's the end of this video, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more content related to this. Take it easy.